Delighted on this episode of Words, Images, and Worlds to be talking about the world of film with author, creator Kevin VanHook. Kevin, thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Jason.
A pleasure, a pleasure. This episode, we're focused on a film that is just in theaters, I believe, and that is Protector. So curious to talk about that. And by means of an initial question here, how has your career path been? How have you gone from comics to film and the things in between? What's that been like?
Well, it's been a long one. I'm fortunate that I started very, very young, and I'm not very, very young anymore. So, but I started off writing and drawing comic books. Wanted to make movies. Eventually, moved to California, learned how to write screenplays, how to direct. Did that. I've directed, edited, written, produced about 7 features. Along the way, I wanted to build a visual effects studio that would help me to have a resource for my movies that I wanted to do. And so that's what we did. And I built a small company, sold that to Film Roman, which is an animation company, did The Simpsons and King of the Hill. Meanwhile, I was still raising money for my own films. Film Roman, a couple of years into that, was acquired by a company called IDT, which is a telecom that wanted to be an entertainment company. And they ended up funding a slate of films with me. And so I made those, and I was head of live action for IDT. And that was all acquired by Stars, the Stars network. And then I left that family of companies. And along the way, they had bought Anchor Bay Home Video, which I had a love of their product anyway. And so Anchor Bay was the domestic video distributor for my films. And ironically, everything I've directed except a little film I did called Alpha Wolf is now controlled under Lionsgate. So they didn't start that way, but Lionsgate acquired the companies that had my projects, and then now they're all under that umbrella. But I still produce visual effects. I did all the Law and Order shows for 5 or 6 years. I did Rizzoli and Isles for 4 or 5 seasons, and lots and lots of movies and TV shows. Worked a lot with a company called Worldwide Effects, which is part of Millennium Pictures, and did Olympus Has Fallen and Trespass and different features there. Trespass was a Nicolas Cage, Nicole Kidman movie. Olympus Has Fallen
I
was Gerard.
remember.
So did a lot of those kinds of things, and then about closing in on 5 years ago, did effects for an independent action film that was being funded by a company called Bondit, and Bondit was had started a post-production arm called Buffalo 8, and through a series of events, we kind of became the de facto visual effects arm of Buffalo 8. We're independent, but we do the bulk of their stuff.
Cool. You've worked on a range of films and visual effects. Your credits on IMDb, it's quite the scroll.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing the thread of sort of action and the visual aesthetics that go with that genre. Anything about that genre that draws you in particular?
I always enjoyed action films. I liked growing up in the era I did. I was a young man when things like Die Hard came out.
Mm-hmm.
So Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Bruce Willis were the action heroes of my 20s and 30s. And so, yeah, I always enjoyed those kind of stories, and even in fiction. I didn't read a whole lot of things like the Destroyer series or Mac Bolan kind of things, but when I did, I would enjoy them. I tend to also be drawn to horror.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my own personal films have been horror films, or action horror. I did a U.S. Army fighting vampires in the jungle movie, so I got to do both. But yeah, it's something I've always been drawn to, and it's just it's something. Action is a genre that always has need of gunplay and stuff like that because it is difficult to do safely on set. We were actually brought in on Rust after the tragedy on that film, where the sad death of the DP, and accidental
Hmm.
shoot, accidental shooting that went on. And we were brought in initially to see if we could show that gunplay could be very realistic and look good and still be all done in post. And but by the time we were brought on, we ended up actually being shifted over and doing more heavy lifting, as I would call it, like matte paintings and things like that to tie these two locations together because they couldn't shoot in the same location they'd shot at 2 years earlier. And we had a young child actor that had grown up considerably, and so we had to do some face replacements and things like that to get it all to play ball.
Yeah, it's really sophisticated technology and technique to weave those worlds together, it sounds like.
It can be for sure, especially when it's not planned, because that was obviously not a planned situation. They ideally they would have shot all in the one place, and you wouldn't have had to try to make two locations feel like it was one. But if you can plan something like a face replacement, if you know you're going to do it, then you can take certain steps to make it easier on us in post. But
Yeah,
not the least of which being adjusting your shutter angle so you have very little motion blur, so that then we have more to track to and more to tie in, and then when we add the motion blur, it all feels natural.
yeah, yeah. Taking it to Protector, how did you get involved with this film?
It was financed by Bonded, and so
Hmm.
it was a Buffalo 8 project that came to us. I was given the script about 15 months ago or so, and read it, had a brief meeting with the director and the DP and some producers, and gave my 2 cents on how I would go about shooting certain sequences to make it easier in post. And then somewhere around June, it landed in our lap where we actually started working on the material. But
Nice.
our process,
Um,
because we are independent, we do go through a bidding process. So we will give them numbers on what we feel we can sort of like we always joke and called it name that tune. Not that anybody knows what that is anymore, but the idea being it's like, okay, this shot requires this bit of work. How long do we think that'll take to do it? What's that translate into dollars? And I put a number down and we bid an entire show.
yeah, yeah. Whatever speaks best to the producer, right?
Yeah, um, it's one of those things. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be honest about the numbers and just say this is what it's going to be. Inevitably, more so now than I've ever dealt with, we get pushback and people wanting to, can you do it for, can you knock a third off or something? And that gets tough. When
Yeah,
it's 10 or 15%, you can make it work better. When it's much more than that, it's tough. But because you're kind of backed into trying to find solutions that might not be your first go-to way to do something.
yeah. Yeah. Uh, for listeners that are not as familiar, Protector, anything that you'd like to kind of let the audience know about this film? I know we're talking action. I know that we have a strong female lead who is kind of in the midst of a revenge story, a rescue story kind of situation. But anything else that you'd like to say before we talk about some of the collaborative process?
Plus, in general, the story is what you've said. The comparisons to Taken will come to mind. There's some comparisons to Rambo that will come to mind.
Mhm.
That it's an original project, but there's inevitably there are going to be things that make you think, oh, that's kind of similar to kind of thing. Milla Jovovich is a really, really highly trained military soldier who has returned home. Her husband has passed away, and she's trying to raise her daughter the best way she can. She's been separated from her for a lot through her childhood, and now daughter's having a 16th birthday, wants to have some freedom, and goes out with her friends, and everything that Mila's character fears happens. So the girl is abducted. It's a human trafficking story. The movie does hold that up as really its biggest aspect of the plot, which is that this is a real problem and a real tragedy not just in the United States, but throughout the world, that women and girls often more than anything else are trafficked and it almost never has any kind of a positive outcome. And so she's on the run to try to find the bad guys that took her daughter and save her daughter. And in the meantime, God help anybody that gets in her way. So it's that kind of a story. But Mila's great. She's done tons and tons of action films. The Resident Evil franchise is huge, and she's done others as well. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah. Now, what was it like to collaborate with her, being someone who, as you said, is very versed in film and in the action sequence sort of interplay?
Well, she and her husband were both producers on this. And her husband is Paul W.S. Anderson, who did the Resident Evil movies and Mortal Kombat and tons of stuff. And so he's also they both are very, very familiar with visual effects as well. And both were very kind and easy to work with. There was a point where Buffalo 8 has a large screening room. And so we're in a theater environment. We're looking at shots and trying to figure out the best. There's always challenges with this stuff. It's not a perfect science, and so you'll end up with photography that might be too dark or too bright or something, and you're trying to balance it along the way. And then my side, my team, and I don't tend to touch color. We just do the visual effects and hand it back, and then they apply whatever color is being done by a trained colorist, somebody who that's just their craft and their skill. And so we're watching this, and we're trying to, watch as best we can in that environment, knowing that this isn't finished color, but it's kind of close and so forth. And there's a part of the film, it's in the trailers, where Mila's character jumps out of a window, shatters glass, and then lands on the top of a car.
Hmm.
And the so that's Milla did probably 95% of her stunts herself, but that particular one is a stunt woman, and so there's some wire work there, and she's in reality she's jumping out of an open window. There's no glass there, and so we're putting all the glass, the frames, all that stuff in, and we when we're first doing our very first pass, and the glass is tricky. You have to have it refract, you have to have bright edges and so forth to get it to look right. And in an early pass, some of the pieces of glass looked a little bit more like paper. And Milla said, it's just, I don't know if it really looks like glass. I mean, it kind of looks a little bit, it looks kind of like more like paper or trash. And I said, visual effects supervisor Kevin VanHook's favorite actress just said his work looks like trash. And and she laughed. And no, that's not what I meant. And I said, I know. We'll get it there. So, but it was I just thought it was a cute interaction. But she was really truly great to work with, and very bright and very knowledgeable, both of them were. And so that was all a great experience. We did a head replacement for maybe 15 shots, 16 shots, something like that in the film, where it's a stunt woman. And so we had to have her scanned, and we used a company called Gentle Giant, who had worked with her before for the Resident Evil movies. And so you do a scan, which is an array of cameras that take still pictures, and then we build that generates a 3D model for you. And so then we were able to track that 3D model in and all that stuff. And it's not the same as like an AI technique like deep fake can be astonishingly real, but those techniques right now anyway require perfect conditions. Like somebody's just sitting there talking. But if you're in the middle of a fight and your hair is flipping around and all this stuff, it just doesn't work. So we had to do it through the old-fashioned way of doing a digital head replacement that was new, 15 years ago.
What was it like to work with the director on the project as well? I imagine there's a lot of creative input that happens behind the scenes.
There is, and he was pretty hands-on in what he wanted and so forth. So we worked together quite a bit, and one of the things that we request is to get one voice. So everybody can have their say on the client side, but I would rather them all discuss it and then come back to me with one note. It was a little bit of a journey with that because he had a DP and editor that wanted to chime in with him, and they would disagree, and it'd be like, well, so I don't know which one of these notes to follow, but that's just a process of working together and figuring that out.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine by now you've had a chance to screen the final film and see how everything came together.
On Saturday, my niece, who's an artist and coordinator with me in my company and on this show, we caught a matinee on Saturday afternoon and looked good. It's um, pleased with the end result, and I thought our effects all really played very clearly and played well.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Uh, I'm always interested in kind of the artistic side, but there's so much technology to what you do. Just curious about how you mingle those skills together and kind of the creative outlet that this gives for you.
Well, um, yes, we have tools. So we are largely I am a compositor, and our company largely is a compositing company, but we do 3D animation as well, CG stuff. But the bulk of our team are compositors, and we use After Effects from Adobe. So that's the primary tool. There's a little Photoshop work, but it's primarily After Effects. And for people who've never been around it, I used to always refer to it as it's Photoshop on wheels. So it's the same
Mhm.
kind of things, but it's for moving pictures. And so at its simplest level, what we do is we take a thing and we put it on top of another thing and make it one thing. And so if it's a muzzle flash that's going on to somebody firing a gun, we do apply a library muzzle flash that we built up a massive library over the years. Some things we've shot ourselves, some things we've acquired, and but then you have to make it feel like there's interactive light that's hitting the person. We add a little bit of puff of smoke from the barrel, those kind of things. Bullet hits, ricochets. In real life, as a filmmaker, I tended to always use blanks and what are called dust hits or zerk hits. You take a paintball gun and you put a little ball filled with either cubic zirconium and flint or bits of talc or brown dust, and you get those ricochets. So like if somebody's standing here and they're trying to duck their head and you see it hit off the wall beside them. That's how that was done. Today we do those with elements that are already pre-built, so nobody's having to risk potentially getting a little piece of plastic in their eye or anything like that. But as far as the act of being an artist, you still have to be an artist to do this stuff. I can train people to do the mechanics. I can train people to do the technical stuff. But at its core, they will hit a ceiling at a certain point where it's like, yeah, I can't tell to get you to the next level because you're not inherently an artist or that's not your passion to try to get there. And so it does definitely make a huge difference if you're already somebody that can create visually.
You mentioned that you had the chance to work with your favorite actress. Any other experiences that you would like to explore creatively? Anything in the path that's ahead that listeners should know about?
Um, well, I mean, I've spent a lot of years raising money on and off for a project that I had started with Casper Van Dien. Casper is somebody I've directed 3 times, and we're good friends and family friends. And the I helped teach his little girl how to do Final Cut Pro work forever ago, and then she went on a few years ago to be Chrissy in Stranger Things and blew up in popularity because one show, one appearance, and suddenly she was a superstar from Stranger Things. And
Mhm.
she had her own career. She was doing stuff. She was in TV shows and movies, but that was just amazing to see. But it's a project that I still would like to try to revisit. We the problem I had with it is we were raising money in a time where before streaming really blew up to what it is today, and the DVD home market was dying. I had a relationship with Sci-Fi Channel, who was my domestic television partner for a lot of my projects. And so they would give me 750,000 for anything I wanted to do for TV rights, to then it became 500, then it became 350, then it became I can give you $50,000 and buy you lunch. And so it just kind of went to the point where it's like I have to look somewhere else because I can't get those numbers to work. So we would raise all the money for all these component parts, and I'm a very hands-on producer, so I was actually dealing directly with state tax credits and Canadian tax credits and the Bank of Montreal, Royal Bank of Canada to bank these credits and do things to be able to get all these numbers to add up at the end, where we have so much money coming in from foreign pre-sales, so much coming from domestic commitments, home video, TV, and so on. And then it was a really unpleasant game of getting it all together, going back to the first person saying, okay, we got the rest of the money together, and having them say, yeah, but I can no longer keep my commitment for that part I chipped in. So, and so you would get to the $3 million or whatever it was we were raising, and then lose 400,000 and have to find that 400,000. It's a challenge, but that's a project I'd still like to get made.
Great actor, Casper Van Dien. I remember seeing him in Starship Troopers. I think that was probably the first time I saw him, and Sleepy Hollow and numerous other projects.
Yeah, he had been in some TV prior to that that I know of without me looking it up. I'm pretty sure he was in either Melrose Place or 90210. Some minor stuff before he blew up with Starship Troopers, and then he did Sleepy Hollow, of course. So those are the two big ones. And Tim Burton still loved working with him and brought him back for Wednesday this last season. He is in an episode, so that was great to see. So.
You mentioned horror a bit ago, so before we tell people where to find the film, where to find out more about you, horror is also a genre that has captured my attention the past few years, especially. Anything that particular kind of storytelling or direction allows you to do as a writer, director, or in visual effects.
Well, to some degree, all of the above. I like I've never been a big fan of what is colloquially called torture porn. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't need it to be so violent and visceral that it makes me sick. The I at that and I know that there's a line there somewhere that I can't really identify. I can sit and enjoy Evil Dead movies, even the remake and so forth, and just love them. But Heredity, right? Or Hereditary,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Yeah, Hereditary. Hell, you know which one I'm talking about. They,
Yes.
there's a point in the film where there's a violent, horrible act on a young girl, and it's just like, yeah, I don't need to watch that, and it's just not my thing. And don't know. There's just certain things I can't watch. There's also a beautiful side of horror, like Del Toro's Frankenstein. You know, it's just cinematically um, different kind of horror experience, classical, gothic, whatever you want to say. But it's just different. But I loved things like the Hammer horror films. I liked the blend of eroticism and horror that they did. I thought it was, and again, it's probably the right time, right place. You know, being a young teenager, when I see that stuff on late night TV, it was like, hey, that's cool. But yeah, it's. I think horror and comedy are two sides of the same coin. They build up a suspension and then there's a release, and I think
Mm-hmm.
um, that's something I enjoy. If you can play that right, if you can fool an audience and not just, it's one thing, it's still satisfying to be successful with a jump scare or a cat scare, but it's more than that. If you can really have a twist. I mean, even things like the first Scream movie, which was somewhat of a comedy as well as a horror movie. You start off watching. I mean, I'm assuming we're almost 30 years into this, so spoilers, okay. But you start off watching Drew Barrymore, who is a major actress, and you think that this is about her, and it's not. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a great moment, a great reveal, because it also tells you, okay, all bets are off. I have no idea who's going to live, who's going to die. Watch it through. The We just recently, just last night, watched a new movie on Netflix called War Machine, starring Alan Rickman, Richter. What's his the Reacher, and he's great and has a great personality, and he's obviously such a huge presence. But it's one of those things where when you're watching it, you might see a major star and have no idea whether they're going to make it through the end or not. It's just that kind of film. So. I always talked about executive decision, did that with Steven Seagal years and years ago, that
Oh yeah.
you assume he's going to be a major part of it because it's Steven Seagal and he's a recognizable face, and he's not. So, but yeah, I like horror a lot. Not necessarily. I don't mind if it's over the top, bloody and things like that. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the movie, but it was about a little girl who turns out to be a vampire. Can't remember the
Abigail.
Abigail.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
that was I loved it. I loved every bit of it. And it's over the top. And I'd loved their Ready or Not was the same filmmakers had done that movie as well, I
Hmm.
thought. So, and it's felt like it was in the same kind of world, you know, that you could believe those films existed in the same universe.
Agreed. Agreed. There's a lot to enjoy there, absolutely. And uh, the final question is Protectors, of course, in theaters. So that's out there for people to check out. But any other places they should go to hear about your work, see what's going on, or learn more?
Well, as you mentioned, my IMDb page, if people want to look me up and see what other things I've done, I'm listed there. There's a Wikipedia page about me that I didn't even have to write myself. And so I'm fairly easy to find out there. I have a Facebook presence. I'm on Instagram, that sort of thing. I started off in comics, as you mentioned, and so I still maintain that. I've been consulting I helped start a publisher in Indonesia 5 years ago, and so they're now taking one of the properties that we've created, and looks like I'm going to be adapting it into a screenplay or co-adapting it into a screenplay with the creator for an animated film, which that would be fun. And I had a hand in animation. I was a vice president of Film Roman for 7 years, and so I produced the Charlie's Angels animated series, which were these little 2-minute shorts that led into the last Charlie's Angels movie with Drew Barrymore and Cameron Diaz and Lucy Liu. But and so we had a small hand in the Simpsons movie and X-Men Evolution and different things. But this would be my first time actually, as far as I know, actually writing an entire screenplay for him.
Nice, nice. Well, looking forward to seeing how that comes together, and certainly glad to have you back here anytime to talk about projects as you'd like in the world of film, comics, and anything in between.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for having
Absolutely.
me.
Anytime, anytime. Thank you so much.